In this comparative study, I will be comparing two war drama films, Grave of the Fireflies, a 1988 film directed by Isao Takahata, and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, a 2008 film directed by Mark Herman. My area of focus is psychoanalysis, and I'm going to look at how emotional state is portrayed through various film tropes and visual elements. Although the films are set in very different social, cultural, and geographical contexts, they both revolve around the devastating events of World War II and depict tragic stories of children and the hardships they have to face. I believe that these two films are connected not only through the overarching theme of war, but also by the sub-themes that the films choose to focus on. Indeed, both Grave of the Fireflies and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas are told from the perspectives of children, which may seem contradictory considering the serious and harsh themes. However, it's precisely this narrative element that allows the films to explore and observe the momentary happiness, callousness, and loss of innocence that occur in a war-torn society. Grave of the Fireflies follows the story of two children, Seita and his little sister Setsuko, trying to survive in World War II Japan. The tragedy doesn't only come from the struggles and deaths of the children, but also from the core ideas the film portrays. Effectively, Grave of the Fireflies explores the tragedy and the consequences suffered by the innocent in World War II, but with more nuance and focus on the shift in values and feelings that take place in the society. The opening scene represents a lot of what the whole film is trying to convey, but can't really be understood without having watched the whole story. It starts with Seita's spirit looking at his own dying body on the floor of a train station, which is a unique narrative device that is used throughout the whole film. As two officers approach Seita's lifeless body, they search it for belongings, expressing no compassion towards him and treating him like an object. The scene itself is an initial setup to the film's tone and atmosphere, and serves as a microcosm of the themes the movie addresses later on. The callousness and indifference of the Japanese society, which is a direct outcome of war's influence on people. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas is a story of a 9-year-old Bruno, the son of a German commandant during World War II, who's been rising in the ranks of the Nazi army, while Bruno has been living a sheltered life in Berlin with his mother Elsa and sister Gretel. His life drastically changes when he has to move away with his family to live near a concentration camp for his dad's work. While there, he meets Schmal, a 9-year-old Jewish boy. Unaware and naive, Bruno believes that Schmal and his family are staying at the camp willingly, and that people in the striped pajamas are just farmers. Bruno's innocence becomes the central part of a tragedy that unfolds later on in the film. The story begins with a bright and cheerful sequence composed of dynamic and panning shots of civilians' peaceful life in Berlin. Bruno and his friends play around pretending to be airplanes, while his mother and workers prepare to move out of their house. The dull and warm colors of the scene, in conjunction with the playful classical music, set a gentle and uplifting tone. The intercuts between the boys and the house get interrupted by a shot of Nazi soldiers detaining Jewish people and taking them away on military transport. However, Bruno, given his age, ignores it and continues playing with his friends. The set tone of the extract becomes contradictory to the unsettling events that the camera focuses on. The scene displays how not necessarily evil people within an evil system blindly perceive the ongoing horrors that really take place. Similarly to the Grave of the Fireflies, the opening scene encapsulates the important themes and the message that the movie expands on later. Throughout the film, Seita is put in extremely desperate situations as he tries to survive and shelter his sister Setsuko from the horrors of the war. The first test that Seita has to go through happens when his hometown undergoes bombing and his mother gets fatally injured. This is the first act in which innocence is taken away from him. It also introduces the idea of how fragile and short-lived innocence is, and how easily it can be taken away from the characters, which is a prominent motif that pervades the film. Later on in the film, unable to stand their aunt's harsh and unjust rules, siblings move out to live on their own in a bomb shelter by the lake. As they move into their new home, their daily life improves significantly. They become happier, more carefree, and cheerful when living with no authority figure to oppress them. Their childlike innocence and joyfulness return as they spend their time playing around and settling into their new place. The story reaches its high point when the siblings decide to gather a bunch of fireflies to illuminate their house at night. As they release them inside the shelter and their faces light up, it represents how it's the first time the two siblings genuinely find hope within their lives. However, this hope is short-lived, as Seita finds Setsuko burying the dead fireflies in the grave. From the beginning, Seita has tried to shield his sister away from the gruesome reality to protect her, but he finds out that she already knows that their mother has passed away. Coming to realization that he was unable to protect this innocence, despite all the efforts, breaks Seita down into tears. The scene is a symbolic portrayal of the parallel between Firefly's short lifespan and the main character's innocence and momentary happiness. On the contrary, in The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, Bruno's innocence is unbendable. He is oblivious about what's going on until the very end, and his lack of understanding leads him to a tragic finale. He sees concentration camp prisoners and believes them to be farmers, and doesn't realize that they are being held against their will. He starts asking questions about Jews to the adults, and while his mother tries to hide the truth by going along with Bruno's imagination, his father Ralph decides to directly explain the Nazi ideology to Bruno. He even hires a tutor to help convince Bruno that Jews are evil. But that proves to be pointless, as Bruno has already interacted with Jews by then, and his experiences don't align with the state's ideas. Bruno's mind simply can't process the reality of things, which are that his father is evil and serves an evil ideology. Similarly, his sister is in the same headspace as Bruno in the beginning. Her greatest concern at the time is maintaining her dolls, but her adventure is different in that her innocence is later replaced with dedication to Nazism, as she gets more and more interested in the adult life, spending most of her time around adults and soldiers. She had nobody to enjoy her favorite interest with, hence why she had to adopt a new identity. By the end, Gretel wants to leave the compound because she misses their time back home when she could innocently enjoy her childhood. A different display of childlike innocence is shown when Elsa is experiencing a mental decline from trying to balance out family morality and responsibility. During this crisis, she finds herself playing on Bruno's swing, which gives us a sense that she is longing to return to her childhood, when her innocence wasn't harmed by the horrors of the adult world. In the end, Bruno sneaks into the camp with Schmoll, where they are both killed in a gas chamber. The finale illustrates how the boy enters a world beyond his innocence and naivety, and how the cruel reality destroys him. The film depicts how innocence protects you from the hurtful truths that come with growing up, but that ultimately it cannot survive in a dreadful world ruined by war. Throughout the film, death in the grave of the Fireflies is treated as something natural, something that can be helped, which can be seen in the various instances where the characters feel distant and unsympathetic towards those more unfortunate than them. We can see that in the scene where Seita takes Setsuko to the beach, and they stumble across someone's corpse, but Seita simply tells Setsuko not to look at it. Another prominent example is the scene where Seita takes Setsuko to the doctor, who says that she needs food, but when asked where they can get it, ignores them. Even when Seita tells the police officer about his desperate situation, all the officer does is offer Seita some water. Grave of the Fireflies presents us with the cold truth that people are ignorant for the victims of the war, as it displays the callousness and complicity of people in the core of a broken society. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas also tackles the issue of inaction, but not out of lack of compassion, but rather forced onto even those who understand the unfairness of the situation. In the scene where Bruno and Schmoll are caught, Bruno is put into position to defend his friend from injustice, but he chooses not to out of fear. It's a great scene because people like to think that they would always stand up for what's right. But Bruno has no allies in this house, no one to take his side. Another case of this would be Bruno's mother, Elsa, who, despite knowing how wrong and immoral the ideology is, doesn't stand up for what's right out of fear of her husband until it directly affects her and her loved ones. Consequently, she just goes along with it, avoiding the topic entirely. While The Grave of the Fireflies portrays indifference and coldness towards others, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas shows how even those who do sympathize with the suffering still aren't able to take action under the pressure of a cruel system. In the end, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas ends tragically, with Bruno dying and his family members grieving his death. No aftermath is revealed, leaving us wondering how this devastating incident will affect the different moral sides of this conflict. Alternatively, Grave of the Fireflies comes full circle to the beginning, with Seita reuniting with Setsuko in the afterlife. They sit on a hill, staring into modern-day Japan, looking in the future at the civilization that often forgets them, disregards the lasting image of history that should never be forgotten. These two films brilliantly explore the themes linked with war that are often overlooked, while also displaying how even with different cultural and social backgrounds, the two films can coincide in their core ideas.